Good evening. Everybody, welcome back to the Good Evening podcast with Yves Batoba, where this season we are focusing on my new book, Immigrant American, Living an American Life with African Perspectives. And I have on the show none other than the Patty Lora. Patty, I appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Nothing, of course. Appreciate you for inviting me.
Yeah, I think so. The first time that we met, I believe, was whenever we were both doing a small group at our church together. I was leading, and I just remember you were there, and then we followed each other on Instagram, and I was like, oh, this girl is dope. I think it's real evident that you have certain foundational values that you stick by. You promote a lot of the things that you believe in. That includes like women empowerment, that includes social justice. And I think you just stand firm in that, right? So I was like, oh yeah, this is somebody that can be the homie for a long time. And you work in sports too, so yeah, a lot of synergy there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've always had good energy, and I just kind of appreciate you always really being a voice, especially with the church and our community. So same feelings for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Or should I say gracias? Because we are talking today about a topic in my book that I feel like a lot of people know what a Afro-Latino is or not. You know, I'm not entirely sure, but there's a chapter in my book in which I talk about how in high school, I had a girlfriend who was Puerto Rican. And I remember she had told her grandma that she and I were dating. And her grandma told her that she was going to go to hell because she is dating somebody that's Black. Yeah. And I remember in my book writing about it, and I'd heard racist things before, but I remember hearing that. I was like, dang, eternal damnation because you're dating somebody that's Black. I was like, that seems a little intense. So in my head, all these thoughts came to me at the time. I was 16 years old. And I'm just thinking to myself, do you even know that you probably have African lineage in your blood, right? Like her granddaughter had big, long, puffy hair. And I was just thinking about how a lot of people may not even realize that during the transatlantic trade, the majority of Africans went over to that side of the world, right? When you're talking about Cuba, you're talking about Dominican Republic, you're talking about Puerto Rico and all those different places. And then afterwards, they had to bring certain Europeans for tourism reasons, right? But anyway, just kind of wanted to touch on your story. Specifically, how did your family go about immigrating to the United States?
Yeah, so again, thank you for having me. I'm obviously, my name is Lora, I'm Afro-Latina, and my parents are born and raised in Dominican Republic. Yeah. So they decided to move to the United States in the early 80s when my mother was pregnant with my sister. Yeah, so mid 80s. And my mother went directly from Dominican Republic to New York, which was also a good hub for a lot of Dominicans, right? Okay. And yeah, I mean, they started from nothing. I mean, like a lot of immigrants do. Yeah. My father was a salesman, and my mom is a rock star of all things, but she also started really, I think, kind of selling clothes and curtains and kind of making it work. My father already had family in Brooklyn, so that's kind of where they stayed, but that was really their journey, really started in New York. And my mom has a sister that lived here, and that's kind of how she decided to really raise her family in Miami-Dade County.
So your sister was the first one that went down to Miami-Dade?
Yeah. We were all born here.
Did everybody else just follow after that, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I'm the youngest of four.
But I mean, spoiled.
Yes, exactly. That was going to be my next sentence. And my oldest sister was born in Puerto Rico, but she's from my father's first marriage. Okay. So she had a different journey here to Miami, but my other siblings were all born in Miami.
Yeah. So what was that like as you're growing up in Miami-Dade County, and it is an area that many consider a melting pot. You have all types of different cultures. One, was it difficult having or trying to find your identity, knowing that you are Afro-Latina, right? Are you trying to connect to your Dominican side, or how was that for you growing up?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, especially born and raised in Miami, would have the same sentiment of true, true racist experiences are kind of under the rug here, as in obvious. It's not as obvious, or I wouldn't say it's not as obvious. It's not. It just looks different compared to middle America. the racism that we experience here. It might show up as colorism or even, sexist, things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up in Hialeah, which are a lot of Cubans.
Right.
A lot of my friends, were beautiful, maybe long straight hair, fair skin, and I probably the majority of the time was the darkest one, right?
Mhm.
And Dominican family loves baseball, so I grew up playing softball, exposed to a lot of white Americans,
Yeah.
just being able to, join a travel team, go to Central Florida that maybe my friends didn't get to do. And in that, I may have not noticed the blatant racism that was happening, but I definitely experienced it and kind of held on to it subconsciously. I may have internalized it in a way. So I think with your book, from what I've heard in your podcast, you've shared very obvious experiences.
Yeah.
For me, it was a little bit more subtle, right? Because a lot of my friends were all first generation,
Wow.
yeah, my best friends growing up, their parents were from Cuba. Natalie and Catherine, they were from Colombia, from Barranquilla. I was exposed to so many cultures, but the truth is that they didn't necessarily look like me. I had different hair, different skin tone. I remember one of my friends' fathers, and it was funny at the time, and it was all play. We went to the beach, and I had dyed my hair kind of like a lighter blonde. Do you remember? My hair was dyed at the time, and when I went to the water, he compared my hair to the seaweed. He was like, "Oh, your hair looks like seaweed." So even like little, dabs like that, which it was funny and harmless, quote unquote, at the time from his perspective. But he wasn't saying that to his daughter, right? His daughter had long, straight, beautiful Colombian hair. So for me, the racism and the colorism just showed up differently.
Yeah.
Growing up here in Miami-Dade County.
Oh,
Although it is a melting pot, it's definitely very segregated, and it just kind of shows up differently.
I know I can definitely relate to a lot of those microaggressions, right? Because I talk
Yeah.
about how even, growing up in Congo, I'm the only, there's no other race, right? It's all Black folks. Matter of
Right.
fact, I can tell you the first time that I saw the first white person that I ever saw, which I write about in the book. And I had to ask my mom about it, what's going on with his skin. And then I remember moving to South Africa, post-apartheid South Africa, where we lived in a whiter neighborhood, but the majority of the population was still Black.
Right.
And whenever we moved to the US, living in Irving, I'm talking about melting pot. Irving was the best. I loved it. Like my neighborhood had people from the Middle East. We had people from Mexico. We had white, we had Black, we had everything. And then we moved to the suburbs in Keller, Texas, where I'm the only Black person like in my entire class. And then having to go through those different microaggressions where people are talking about my hair, right? People talking about my skin. But one thing that always sticks out to me, one thing that you mentioned is the colorism, Patty. And it's so weird. Do you think colorism is like, hey, the darker it is, the better? The lighter it is, the better? Like what was your experience going up with that? Because I've seen it go both ways.
Oh yeah, no, especially yeah, I would obviously, I'm only speaking for Dominican culture. It was the lighter the better. That was basically my experience. Obviously, I'm very much in the middle, I would say, for the Dominican palette, I guess. And for me growing up, honestly, going back to the microaggressions, when people would call out my skin or my hair, I just kind of like owned it. I didn't care. I was just really, really cocky with it. And that might come from playing sports, and my father kind of raised me that way, like how a lot of men are raised, honestly, to like, I don't want to curse, but kind of be a cabrón, like a little bit. And that was kind of my attitude when people would call out my attributes just because it was different from my classmates or my girlfriends.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to colorism, it was definitely the lighter than the better.
Does that still exist now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's most obvious. I think for me, I could tell my stories a little easier with hair. I think hair was the most obvious for me.
Yeah.
Because even in Spanish culture, mainly in like older generations, they'll say pelo malo. So if your hair is curlier or kinky, they'll be like, oh, that's bad hair. If your hair is straight, they'll be like, oh, you have that good hair.
Interesting.
And it's been like dismantled, I would say, or as we're working, you could see the younger generation working towards dismantling those kind of terms. Obviously, there's no such thing as bad hair. But that's kind of how I showcase, colorism within the Latino community.
Yeah, I went back to Congo in 2018 for the first time. And I remember going over to some of my family members' houses who I hadn't seen in 20 years. And I'm seeing like in their bathrooms, lightening cream that they're putting on their bodies to appear lighter. Because colorism is still so prevalent, even in that side of the world where people want to appear, with fairer skin, they want to appear even lighter, right? Which is strange, right? Because like my best friend growing up, whenever I got here, was a guy from Sudan. I mean, blackest dude I ever seen in my life. Like so black he didn't year look blue. And but I always thought that was so dope, right?
Right.
Yeah, it looked like a lot of strength. Honestly, the way that I saw it, I was like, hey, the color to me is strong. It's powerful, it's deep. So that colorism, I think a lot of that has to do with the way that we think about the color black. And honestly, we've been brainwashed by.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's going back to like, internalizing those terms. And really, like for me, I mean, I preach going to church, prayer life, going and getting therapy, because we really don't notice how much we internalize that like the joke I made earlier about the seaweed. We really don't realize how that jeopardizes our relationship with ourselves, with our hair, with our skin, how that could damage one's relationship with really just taking care of ourselves. And that's the only way we're going to flourish and get to the best state of being the best version of yourself, is if you take care of your needs. So
what practical things did you do to internalize those things? Like, I know you were a real confident kid growing up, right? And I know softball, softball players are tough too, right? Softball players are tough. But you talk about therapy, you talk about going to church and all these different things. Like, are those things that you did yourself, or did you just kind of, was it just kind of, who you are and naturally the way that you were raised, you were able to kind of own it and internalize it earlier?
Yeah, so I would say those things, I think that comes from just, observing my family, being the youngest one. My family's a matriarchy. I mean, it's all women, holding it down. They're all entrepreneurs in their own right. My oldest sister is a teacher for like over 15 years now, I believe. My sister owns her own hair salon. My cousin in New York owns her hair salon. My mom is a rock star. So I really just watched them kind of own their own voice. And I just think after like just being the youngest, you don't have anything to lose. So I would just kind of like, I would just do it. Going to therapy and church was definitely when I was older. That was kind of really my own journey into, I guess, being an adult and just womanhood. Those are the tools that I found that maybe look a little different from my family members. But to your first question about internalizing it, one example is my mother would always say that I loved hats when I was a little girl. I like loved hats, and that wasn't true. I just noticed that they didn't know how to do my hair. My sister has straight hair. Both of my sisters. My mother has very straight hair. Their hair doesn't look like mine, so they struggled a lot really doing my hair. And I would notice and I would get frustrated, and I had all the bad haircuts, and I would just wear a hat because when I played softball, I wore a hat and my hair wasn't something I had to think about. One season I played basketball. I don't know why. I'm like awful at contact.
I don't know why.
I would just fight all the time. I'm like, if you don't let me dribble this basketball, I was just not it. Contact was not it. But my brother played and he was so good and I wanted to be like him. So I enrolled in basketball, and first off, we won the championship, just clearing that out there. I was probably like 9, 10 years old.
But you didn't do anything.
I mean, who knows? But the reason I say that story is because I wore a hat playing basketball. I wore it backwards, And I mean, it's funny now, but when I think back of like that little like inner child, that young girl, I mean, I was self-conscious about my hair because of the attention that it drew, because my family didn't know how to style my hair, how to take care of my hair. Now, I mean, natural hair is very in, and you can go to Walgreens and get curly hair products. You couldn't do that back in like 98. That didn't, the curl box, the Shea Moisture didn't really exist. My niece has beautiful, beautiful hair. Now my sister could style her hair with all these options that weren't available to me at the time. So that is one example of a way that I internalized a little bit of the language of like, oh, I have bad hair and I need to cover it up.
Yeah, I'm just glad that the language for one switched up, right? And that it's almost come back full circle to where it's cool again, right? To have different texture type of hair, right? But I always think it's so cool whenever everybody in a family, like you're all one family and you have different types of hair, right? Like for the most part, everyone in my family has pretty much the same hair, right? Or whenever it's different color hair, different texture hair, but also like different skin tones, like in the same family. I just feel like that almost gives you just a better worldview. And I feel like especially growing up in a place like Miami, where you run into so many different types of cultures and so many different types of people, you're able to almost appreciate it a lot more, especially than a place like Texas, where it's like,
Right.
hey, we stay over here, we stay over here, we stay over here, and that's all. You know, these are the people that we interact with. So,
Yeah, yeah, because imagínate, like, and I'm gonna go, speak Spanglish here, but
go ahead.
you know, when people ask me where I'm from, I'm born and raised in Miami, but I'm Dominican. Like,
Mhm.
like I'm very proud of my culture and I have my skin tone and my hair. But my sister, she's fair skin, like I said, and straight hair. When people ask her where she's from, she says Dominican. We're having two different life experiences if you go to a place like Texas.
Yeah.
Think that in itself is it's a lot for people to like understand and take in, because that's obviously different from being Afro-American or white American. But I think that's a beautiful thing of at least with the Dominican culture, is all I could speak about, is that, to your point, we all look so different.
Mhm.
We all have so many different features, and we all experience the world from our own perspective, which is very unique and something that we should really embrace.
No, absolutely. I always wonder if a lot of Dominicans tend to lean into like their African heritage as well, because it's so, it's so unique. Depending on what side of the island you're on, certain people are like, yeah, I really own that African heritage. And then there are other people who are like, not so much, right? I don't really connect with that side. So that's always been interesting to me, right? Depending on who I meet and who I talk to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that goes back to this might be a good segue on why education is so important.
Mhm.
Understanding our roots, understanding Dominican Republic was the first stop in the African diaspora. So just understanding really how our country, it's not an island, it's connected to Haiti, it's one. How our country really became, and how we flourished to what it is today. I think once you kind of have that switch and do your research, you have to connect to the African roots within you. Doesn't matter what your skin tone or what your hair color is. If you truly connect with your heritage and with your parents, and you eat the food and you dance the music, right? Then like there like our food, everything represents African roots. So uh, I would encourage everyone to do their research for sure.
I had Thanksgiving once with a well, so they were Cuban, right? I had a
Yeah.
Thanksgiving with a Cuban family, and I remember the whole time I was there. It was my first time having Thanksgiving with like non-black folks, and I just remember watching the interactions. I was like, oh, we all the same. We're all loud. We all love this type of music. We love a lot of flavor in our food. We dance a
Yeah.
lot. I'm like, yo, we really are all the same people. So
Yeah.
it was dope seeing just like the similarities between the cultures, right? I loved that part of it. I definitely.
Yeah, and like if you even look at Dominican, our like very famous traditional plates, tres golpes, mango, which is like the plátano, all that has African roots tied to it.
Oh, yeah.
So there's just no way you can embrace the culture and not embrace the African roots that come with it.
I love that. I love that. So you're talking about education, and I know that recently you just graduated from Florida International University. So congratulations to you on that. So can you kind of go and talk about that journey? Because I know that, if I'm not mistaken, first generation
Yeah.
college graduate, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, like I mentioned, I played softball all my life, and my goal was to play college ball. I didn't really reach that goal. And then in 2008, which is when I graduated high school, I kind of aged myself there, but that's okay.
Girl, you
2008, in 2008, that's kind of when, recession hit, the economy fell, and I just went straight to college with no idea what I wanted to do. And I really just kind of stepped into the family role, which happens a lot with first generation,
yeah.
and helping my parents who were unfortunately kind of suffering from the recession. So
Mm.
I really just stepped into that role. I completed my 2 years. And after I completed my 2 years, I was never a good student. So I was like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
I'm going into working full time. I want to make some money. I got really some really cool entrepreneurship experience, which I felt in my heart is what I wanted to do. Um, and after I had some really cool journeys with entrepreneurship, I jumped right into sports. Sports was always something I always wanted to do as well.
Yeah.
And I would also like kind of take this opportunity, um, college advisors are obviously really, really important, but your community, especially if you could, for like anyone younger watching, especially if you can notice that, that you're going through something, like how we're all going through a global pandemic, kind of have to lean on your community and your family. I went to a college advisor. I told them I wanted to work in sports, and I wanted to do more the business side. I always knew I wanted to do entrepreneurship and I wanted kind of a business course. And he told me that I had a nice smile, so I should only focus on doing like TV work. And I was livid. Like the feminist in me was like, I was
Oh,
pissed.
shoot,
It
I just
made
got to say,
me, yeah, it made me hate school. And again, he probably could have worded it just differently because I love broadcasting, sports broadcasting now. At the ripe age of 31. But if he would have just used different language, I think I would have leaned into, maybe let me explore broadcasting, right?
yeah,
But because he used that certain language, it just made me hate school.
right.
And I wouldn't want any other, especially like young Black Latina women, to feel like they have to make decisions based on their appearances, right? We're all a lot more than that. So I want to take the opportunity to share that part of my journey. But yeah, so I went ahead and I got experience in sports business, and then COVID hit. I got laid off. I got furloughed and then laid off. And then once I got furloughed, I was just kind of like, you know what? It's on my heart to go back to school. Let me just take advantage of the time and the opportunity. And I enrolled and I went back.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Congrats to you.
Thank
And
you.
you know what? There are so many people who come here with no direction of what the educational process is supposed to look like,
Right.
especially from the perspective of higher education. Because my family and I came here, we knew nothing about what that was supposed to look like.
Right.
I didn't even know that I could get a scholarship for playing sports. Uh,
Same. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, I knew I wanted to play sports, but in my mind, I was like, yeah, I'll just go to Oklahoma State and then I'll try out for the football team just like I did in high school and I'll get on. So I ended up walking on at Oklahoma State. Fortunately, I had an academic scholarship, but if I knew anything about like, hey, I need to send my film, send my tape out to these different schools, my story may have been a whole lot different, but I knew nothing about it. So
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
time that young Africans come over to the country, in fact, just there's a kid now that I'm mentoring who plays soccer up in Michigan, and for me, it's all about helping them navigate that path because it is so unfamiliar to not just them, but their family, right? Their entire, their parents. They have no idea what that ecosystem is even supposed to look like because intercollegiate athletics is pretty unique to the United States and no other part of it.
Yeah, and that also, my parents didn't attend college, so it was a little bit like, ask someone at the school to help you apply for FSU, like ask your coach or something, And it goes the same with like credit and like handling like financial literacy, right? Credit obviously is very unique to the States. It doesn't exist to that capacity in other places. So really understanding all that as an immigrant kid. And then like when you have certain problems, not being able to go to your parents, having to like lean on other, obviously what you're doing with mentorship. It's just the experience is so different for
Yeah,
us at those really important ages. And it's important to like lean in and just kind of embrace that really early on.
definitely. Do you ever feel an obligation now to educate those about your heritage or even just the things that you mentioned, right? Even if it's going back to your community and talking about credit, budgeting, or investing, or just financial literacy overall?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the way I approach work, the way I approach anything, even online, the way I speak here is in my own way, kind of showing up for the community. And I don't shy away from who I am, what I stand for. Even like with my new job now, I came through, the gates blazing, like this is my heritage, this is what I eat in the morning, this is what I love to do. I don't encourage, quote unquote fitting in. And I know that that comes with certain level of, I guess, with maturity.
Mhm.
And that doesn't, it sounds sexy, but it's not always the best experience, especially for women. you could definitely get some pushback. But that in itself, for me, is one way that I could show up for anyone else coming behind me.
I absolutely love that because I think that the world is a better place. Corporate America is a better place. Companies are a better place whenever it's not just diverse, but it's also very inclusive, right? It's not just, yeah, we allow you to be here. No, it's, hey, I want to learn more about your heritage, about what you do, and
Yeah.
figure out how it can be of value to what we all do, right, together. Um,
Right.
that's just one of the things that I'm a big advocate for. And especially as it pertains to empowering women in the sports industry in particular. I've mentioned that several times over the course of the podcast, but I think that men need to do a better job of being advocates for women in sports. But that's another story. I appreciate you being on here. Is there anywhere that people can go and they can find you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm on all social media at Patty Lora _. And yeah, and I have a few projects coming out. I don't know if I could share them right now, but I definitely have a few different things up my sleeve for 2022. So that's where they could find me. And thank you for everything that you're doing. And I'm excited for everything you have coming and your book, and happy to promote it.
No doubt. Sure. That's the entrepreneur in you. So I can't wait to hear what those things are that are coming out. But Patty, thank you so much for being here. I love that people get to learn more about the Afro-Latina, really the part of the country that I feel like almost goes forgotten, right? I think a lot of people don't even realize it, especially in certain sectors of the United States. Maybe not in Miami as much because it is such a melting pot, but shoot, I didn't know anything about it, especially when I got down and I started meeting these Cubans and they were the same skin tone as me. And I, like, are you Cuban? I thought you were. So yeah. I love it.
Yeah. And I would encourage, especially if any Latinos are watching this and kind of not familiar with the term Afro-Latina or Latino. I mean, I always am Black Latina too, like I tell people all the time, Black is not a bad word. Okay. Like I'm Black, you're Black. It's all good.
Yeah.
And if that's a term that you feel more comfortable with, then say that. It's just something to like, and I appreciate what you're doing, giving a platform to just kind of have Latinos share that part of their culture and their heritage and embracing it, because it's only going to do better for all of us and for the generation behind us.
I have a chapter in my book called The Color is Deep. I would encourage everybody, if you are reading the book, Immigrant American, Living an American Life with African Perspectives, definitely check out that chapter. That was actually one of my favorite chapters to write. I felt like some of my best writing happened between chapter 8 and chapter 12. So hey, I'm just letting y'all know, all right? I'm throwing that. Good evening.